Hello and welcome to another episode of From the Beginning here on Heavenward Thinking. Today we're continuing on our journey in the book of Leviticus. We're looking at Leviticus chapter 21 today, so I'll read it and we'll get right into this week's teaching. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, a priest must not make himself ceremonially unclean for any of his people who die except for a close relative, such as his mother or father, his son or daughter, his brother, or an unmarried sister who is dependent on him since she has no husband. For her he may make himself unclean. He must not make himself unclean for people related to him by marriage, and so defile himself. Priests must not shave their heads or shave off the edges of their beards or cut their bodies. They must be holy to their God and must not profane the name of their God because they present the food offerings to the Lord, the food of their God. They are to be holy. They must not marry women defiled by prostitution or divorced from their husbands because priests are holy to their God. Regard them as holy because they offer up the food of your God. Consider them holy because I, the Lord, am holy, I who make you holy. If a priest's daughter defiles herself by becoming a prostitute, she disgraces her father. She must be burned in the fire. The high priest, the one among his brothers who has had the anointing oil poured on his head and who has been ordained to wear the priestly garments, must not let his hair become unkempt or tear his clothes. He must not enter a place where there is a dead body. He must not make himself unclean even for his father or mother, nor leave the sanctuary of his God or desecrate it, because he has been dedicated by the anointing oil of his God. I am the Lord. The woman he marries must be a virgin. He must not marry a widow, a divorced woman, or a woman defiled by prostitution, but only a virgin from his own people, so that he will not defile his offspring among his people. I am the Lord, who makes him holy. The Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, for the generations to come, none of your descendants who has a defect may come near to offer the food of his God. No man who has any defect may come near. No man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed. No man with a crippled foot or hand, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has any eye defect, or who is festering or running sores or damaged testicles. No descendant of Aaron the priest who has any defect is to come near to present the food offerings to the Lord. He has a defect. He must not come near to offer the food of his God. He may eat the most holy food of his God as well as the holy food, yet because of his defect, he must not go near the curtain or approach the altar, and so desecrate my sanctuary. I am the Lord who makes them holy. So Moses told this to Aaron and his sons, and to all the Israelites. As we look at this chapter, we continue to see some of the themes that we've been building upon throughout the book of Leviticus. And we've seen this constant idea that God continually reminds his people that he is the Lord who makes them holy. And again, we see that multiple times just in this chapter. Always God is trying to point out here in the book of Leviticus to his people that he is different. He is holy, he is set apart, and his people are to be likewise, especially here in this chapter that deals with rules for the priests. We see that the descendants of Aaron, the sons of Aaron, and then the descendants afterward are supposed to be very different, even than the community around them, the Israelites. They are to be holy, they are not to make themselves unclean, and we see very specific regulations about that, and they are supposed to even marry a certain type of person, and they are supposed to have even certain physical characteristics, and if they have certain other characteristics, they're not to go before the Lord. They're allowed to eat the food of that is holy, but they're not allowed to go before and serve the Lord in certain ways, because God is holy and he wants his people, and especially these priests, to be different and to be holy and set apart, just like he is set apart and holy and different. Again, these chapters that we've been going through really continue to just hit this on the head over and over and over, trying to ingrain in the Israelites back then, and now to us, who our God is, that he is different and he wants, at that time, the Israelites and now us, to be different, to be holy, to be set apart, to not be like the rest of the world. And so we see here in the early part of this chapter, regulations given to the priests about not making themselves ceremonially unclean when people die. And it's a very specific list of people that they're allowed to make themselves ceremonially unclean for. Very specific. We're not going to go into all the details of why this and why not that. We just see that God is giving some specific regulations that his priests are not to make themselves unclean. And then it goes into regulations even about not shaving their heads or the edges of their beards or cutting their bodies. They're supposed to be different, even physically, than other people, and supposed to be holy, set apart for God. It says they must be holy to their God and must not profane the name of their God, because they present the food offerings to the Lord, the food of their God. They are to be holy. Again, because they're serving God, they are to be holy. And so that should give us pause, and it should make us reflect in our own lives. If we're serving the Lord today in our communities, in our workplaces, in our families, if we're serving God in different ways, then we should be holy too. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to follow all of these Levitical priesthood regulations about how we cut our hair and how exactly we look physically and all these different things. But it does mean that we should be living a holy lifestyle, being different, not engaging in sinful practices, because God is showing here to the Israelites that they are supposed to look different and be different ultimately. He's more concerned about who they are as people, less concerned about what they look like on the outside, but he's getting the point across to them in the physical ways that then is going to hopefully get their attention spiritually. And so for us, we can take this and go, well, it might not matter how I have a haircut and how I look exactly, but it does matter the conduct I have, the way I act, the things I do, the things I say. I shouldn't be profaning the name of God, and that should be something we take seriously. We should be offering ourselves as holy before the Lord, just like the priests were to offer themselves as holy before the Lord. And they were carrying out specific holy regulations, and they were giving offerings, presenting food that was holy, dedicated to God. Because again, it wasn't that they were holy in and of themselves, or the things they were doing were holy in and of themselves. It was God who made them holy, made the things that they were doing holy, because ultimately that holiness comes from God, and we're just reflecting that. Hopefully that's what we're doing in our lives, and not reflecting uncleanness. Then we see here regulations for marriage and who they were supposed to marry, that they were supposed to marry a virgin, not someone who had been a prostitute or had been divorced or widowed. They had to, again, be different in that, and it should be something that we look at in our own lives. We should be seeking holy lifestyles, holy living. We shouldn't be just engaging in prostitution and other practices that the world thinks is okay. We should be holy in our sexual relations. We've seen that in multiple chapters of Leviticus, as well as all the areas of our life being holy for the Lord. And then we get at the very end of this chapter, we see all these different deformities and defects that would prevent these Israelite priests from going before the Lord and serving him in these specific ways of offering the food and going before the curtain or approaching the altar of God. They weren't allowed to do that because of these defects. Again, something we see throughout the Old Testament in the offerings themselves before the Lord, that even the offerings weren't to have any defect. The lambs offered to God had to be perfect. They couldn't have any kind of a defect because God is holy. Thus, also the people offering the sacrifices had to be holy, and they couldn't have a defect. Again, God's trying to show the Israelites and get the point across that he is a holy God. And because we are human and sinful and forget things easily, God has to continually remind us again and again and again. And so it can look really repetitive in Leviticus, all these regulations, and it can be like, wow, how many times do I need to hear God say, I am the Lord who makes you holy, or you need to be clean and not let yourself be unclean? We may think, how many times do I need to hear that? Well, we are people who quickly forget. And the Israelites were just like us in that respect. They quickly forgot, and so God had to remind them constantly that he was a holy God. He was making them holy. They were supposed to be different, and they needed to be reminded of that over and over and over again, just like you and I need to be reminded that we should be living a holy and set-apart lifestyle for God. And that's my hope for you this week, that you would learn something from this chapter, that you'd see that you serve a holy God, and that you would try to reflect that and to be holy and set apart in your life to bring glory and honor to the Lord. That's my challenge for you this week, and I hope you'll join us next time on another episode of From the Beginning here on Heavenward Thinking.